one of my two-step process to how to successfully build a community spirit is open the door. And so we opened the door and people from the village next door came by and they said, can we have a job? And I said, well, thank God you need a job because I need a team. So this seems like a really good deal. And they didn't murder me. Many of them are actually still here. So I think if you open the door, you will find yourself very often surprised by the fact that the people on the other side of it are just like you, human. And just like you have things that they need and things that they can offer. Travel is, what do they say, transformative or, transcendental when you connect with other humans who are different from you. And it reminds you that we can all be different and at the same time, we can all be the same. Community really is the fundamental of life, and being a happy adult.
Hello, and welcome to the Travel Growth Podcast. I'm Tom McLaughlin, founder of North9, and this is where I speak to successful travel business leaders and dig into the successes, challenges, and learnings from their experiences over the years. So you, the listener, can take away actionable advice to improve your own businesses and maybe even lives too. My guest today is Portia Hart, a trailblazing entrepreneur who left the high-octane world of South of France yachting to build something impossible on an island off the coast of Colombia. She's the founder of Blue Apple Beach, Cartagena's first B-Corp certified hotel and beach club, and she's the driving force behind the Green Apple Foundation, an NGO that has quite literally turned the hospitality industry's waste into the building blocks of the local economy. Since moving to Colombia, Portia has opened 4 beach clubs, 2 hotels, 2 bars and 2 non-profits. So she's a busy lady. And she's also recently set up Nuestra Cartagena, bringing together 20 local hospitality brands to run an international PR campaign for the city. Portia is far more than a hotel owner. From tackling the logistical nightmares of island infrastructure to proving that social equity and environmental activism are actually drivers of profit, she's redefined what it means to be a modern hotelier in a developing landscape. We get into all sorts of topics in our chat, from the 10,000 hours of being a customer and integrating into a local community to creating a business culture that people love and make them want to follow you, and also all aspects of profitable sustainability. Doing the right thing is good for business was a particular highlight of mine from the conversation. Oh, and she also dropped in about the time that Jeff Bezos came to stay. So, all that said, please enjoy my conversation with the powerhouse behind Blue Apple Beach and much, much more, Portia Hart. Hello, Portia. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Tom.
Thank you for...
I wish I could see where you are.
No, I'm already jealous of where you are with chirping birds and beach scenes in the background, but I'm gonna slide straight past that one so I don't get too jealous. Thank you for coming on. We have got to know each other a little bit over the last couple of years through the Conscious Travel Foundation and various other places, and I'm always fascinated when I hear you talking in conversations or I'm involved in panels with you or things like that. So I'm very much looking forward to this one. And I'm sure lots of people will get lots from your experience and what you've done over the years. So appreciate you taking the time.
It's very nice to be here. And I'm amazed that you're fascinated by me talking because I feel like I so rarely stay on topic.
Well, that's my job for today.
I will do my best to do it today. Yeah.
I guess normally with people, I kind of start with the first bit of the journey just to give some context for anyone who doesn't know. Sometimes that's leading up to starting their business, but maybe for you, we could just go to getting to Colombia. Maybe you could sort of start us off there. Like, what did you do? I don't know. It could be education, could be early jobs, whatever you think most interesting. But yeah, maybe you could start with that.
I'll try to keep this under 60 seconds. Because I know that when we had our first conversation, this took up a lot of time. I was born in the UK, but I haven't lived there now for about 20 years. If British people are listening to this, they'll probably say I now sound quite American, but over here people think I still sound super British. But my mum is from Trinidad and Tobago, and my dad's British. And I did manage to stay in the UK till I was about 20, with a mild detour through Japan at some point. But I just had itchy feet from a very young age. And before I got to Colombia, I spent nearly 10 years living in the south of France, not because I'm terribly fancy and owned a yacht, but because I wanted to work somewhere where the weather was nice. And that has actually been quite a repetitive motivation throughout my career, which is why I now live in the Caribbean. And I worked actually and I'm always a bit embarrassed to say it, but then I also think it's really important to be very honest about your backgrounds, because of course, where we were got us to where we are. I worked in the super yachting industry for nearly 10 years, in an office in Monaco. Uh, so about as far away from conscious travel as you can get, especially in that era. It wasn't the 90s, but it was the kind of 2010s and until 2014, where very few people were really talking about sustainability, carbon. We were still dealing with quite a lot of heavy discrimination in the industry. Compliance was relatively new. I was actually a compliance officer in my company for a while and asking people about origin of funds before doing these deals that were worth hundreds of millions of euros. And while I am incredibly grateful for the opportunities that I had when I worked down there, because the South of France is a beautiful place, and I worked with actually really pioneering people. The company that I worked at was one of the first to start talking about environmental stewardship and mental health actually on board yachts. Anyone that's watched Below Deck knows that's probably a very, very necessary topic. So I had a really, really great start. But I did reach a stage when I was thinking, if I spend the rest of my life in this job and in this geography, I'm going to become pretty disassociated from what the world actually looks like. And moving to Colombia was kind of the decision to balance out my 20s. I thought, if I go somewhere that is perhaps on the way up rather than on the way down, somewhere where money isn't everything and where no one's heard of a super yacht, I can kind of maybe, yeah, reset my karma. And I thought I'd be here for a couple of years, but here I am 11 years later.
So when you went there, were you going to somewhere specific? Did you have a job? Like, what was or did you just up sticks and think, I'm going to Colombia and I'll work it out when I get there?
No, I did have a job. Actually, a British guy that I knew from Monaco had married a Colombian girl, and she was a delight. And they had a really amazingly fun wedding. And he said, "We're going to move to Colombia, and I'm going to start a company. Do you want to come and help me?" And I said, "Well, I've never been to Colombia. I don't speak Spanish. And what does your company do?" But yes. Um, and we talked about it for about a year, so it wasn't that much of a rash decision. Um, and he worked in property development, and his plan was to just move to Colombia with his wife so they could have their kids there and the kids could spend time with their grandparents. And he would do something to do with property development. But within about 4 months of moving here, they had actually moved back to Monaco. It turned out that his wife really didn't like living in Colombia. And so I found myself quite early on without a plan. Um, I'd quit my job. I'd been there for nearly 10 years. It was a huge deal. I couldn't go back. I'd thrown a big party. I was very embarrassed about this not working out. So I said, okay, well, I took a gap year before university, but I hadn't taken any time off since then. So I guess I'll just stay in Colombia for a few months. I've got some savings. Maybe I'll learn Spanish and then sort of crawl back to Europe and see what happens. And so I just traveled around by myself, and I ended up in Cartagena last. And I arrived here, and it's kind of strange to say, and it took me a few years to really understand it. But Cartagena is different from the rest of Colombia. So when people imagine a Latino, I think they imagine someone that looks like Sofia Vergara, or maybe now they imagine someone that looks like Bad Bunny. But Cartagena has a really, really strong African heritage because obviously it was a slave port. So a lot of Africans came here. So Cartagena is basically a lot of them look like me. And it was the first place I'd ever been in my life where everybody around me looked like me. And I felt very, very at home here very quickly, even though I still didn't speak much Spanish. And at that time, there was just this strange little micro boom of Colombians who had perhaps been taken out of the country by their parents for safety reasons during the 90s and early 2000s. And they were just coming home. And a lot of them had been educated overseas. Maybe they'd been to university in Europe or in Canada or in the States. And they were all in their late 20s, early 30s and starting companies. And most of them were in tourism because that was kind of it's an obvious choice for Cartagena. And I was, fresh off the boat from the south of France. with a very, very high understanding of what ultra luxury travel looks like in a country and in a city where there was a lot of hunger to advance and to move and to grow and to do cool, new and exciting things, but relatively few people with overseas experience. And so I just sort of got stuck in and didn't know the details of what I now do, but knew what the end result should look like, and was just so bowled over by the difference between Europe, where all the businesses that I knew were owned by kind of aging white men, to Cartagena, where all the businesses that I was coming across were owned by young women and, young men as well, but people in their late 20s, early 30s who didn't really know what they were doing, but were full of enthusiasm and hope. And it was such an exciting time to be here. So that's why I'm still here.
Yeah. And what happened, join the dots between that moment and seeing that and realizing that and Blue Apple coming around and that happening?
There are a lot of dots, but the sort of key takeaways are that I sort of helped friends a little bit. You know, some people were setting up a travel company, an agency, and I did I won't even call it consultancy. It was just more like sitting around over a beer and talking about, you know, what high-end travel looked like on the face of it.
If that's not consultancy, then I'm out of a job. Yeah.
The only thing is I didn't know how to write a massive invoice for it at the end of the chat. But at the same time, I was still sort of semi on sabbatical, and I kept trying to go to the beach. And of course, if you've lived or even been to the south of France, you'll know that going to the beach and having lunch is pretty much all people do. And Cartagena, for those of you that don't know it, firstly, you should come here. But it is a colonial city. It was built about 500 years ago by the Spanish. It's incredibly beautiful. It's right on the Caribbean coast. It's actually, weirdly, and this is a statistic that I'm very happy that I no longer need to have in my mind, but it is the only place in the world where an 80-meter super yacht can park up within 50 meters of a UNESCO heritage site. So that gives you an idea of kind of how special it is. And it's got this amazing archipelago of islands. So you can have a Caribbean sort of beach experience, pina coladas, coconuts, etc. And you can also have a deeply cultural experience, see incredible architecture. And I kept trying to go to the beach because during the day it's really hot. And there were no beach clubs. There were kind of little places where you could go and sit on the sand and eat a fresh fish with your hands, and it was charming. But after you'd done that a few times, you were thinking, well, you know, there's a 5-star hotel in town. There's plenty of them. And there are some really, really good restaurants in town. Why is it as soon as we get to the beach, everything collapses? And people told me, local friends, you know, well, it's just, I don't know, we're just not really into beach culture. Like, for us, going to the beach is that it's sitting on the sand and it's not kind of rosé and music and all these things that you keep talking about. And I thought, well, if I want it and there are more and more people coming to Cartagena on holiday, I can't be the only one. I'm quite a generic person.
Yeah.
So I should open a beach club. And then, of course, I remembered that I had no idea how to run a beach club because I'd never run a restaurant and I'd never been in a kitchen and I can't cook and I don't know how to make a cocktail. But as fate would have it, that week I met a chef who was half Colombian, half Spanish, and had spent the last 15 years working in Ibiza, running kitchens there. And I told him my idea and he said, that's absolutely brilliant, let's do it.
Right.
And he said, don't worry about the kitchen, I'll take care of that. You take care of front of house. And I remember having read Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers relatively recently. And he had said this, you know, there's this 10,000 hour rule that anyone that does anything for 10,000 hours will eventually become really good at it. And he talks about musicians and sports people. And I kind of jokingly said to myself, well, I've lived in between Nice and Monaco for 8 years. And I sound like the world's most dreadful person when I say this, but I've probably spent 10,000 hours having lunch on the beach. So I may as well turn that into something if that is the only skill that I've got. And I think that was what gave me that and a hefty dollop of complete ignorance and a lot of enthusiasm was what kind of pushed me over the edge and said, right, let's do this. Let's set up this little beach club.
Yeah.
And that was the beginning of Blue Apple, basically.
naivety is probably a pretty
Yes,
core thing amongst many entrepreneurs. I think it's all about not knowing half of what's to come that sort of makes you think it's a good idea.
exactly. It's not people say, "Oh, you're really not risk averse." I say, "No, I'm just too stupid to think about the actual risks."
Well, I mean, as we've just been saying before we came on, there's a lot to be said for just thinking about the positive things and yeah, not sitting
And see
meandering
where it
around.
takes you.
Yeah, yeah. So you set up Blue Apple. What does it look like now? Tell us a little bit more about it. And I know you had a period. I don't know if it was. I feel like I've written down. It's like 6 weeks from going. Oh, I've got this idea to here it is. So tell us that formation period and then what it's grown to and what it is now.
Well, the reason that we started it so quickly, and I won't go into that because that really is a whole other podcast, but I had another business in Colombia just before Blue Apple with the same chef. And let's just say I call it my Colombian MBA. It cost me a little bit of money, took a year of my life and taught me a lot. Um, and I came out of that business and found myself with about 10 members of staff who had all quit their jobs in solidarity with me. And I needed to find them something to do because I felt a deep amount of responsibility. Not having a job in Colombia is not fun. It's not like you're just going to find one the next day. And so we found this property at Blue Apple, and it was really like, we've got to get this up and running so that we can pay people's salaries. And that's why we went from 0 to open in 6 weeks. But you can imagine in 6 weeks, you're not going to build a Ritz-Carlton. And we didn't have any money, really. And so the chef actually built the kitchen himself, the bricks and mortar of it. And there were a team of us kind of arranging the furniture and setting everything up. We didn't really have builders. We had a carpenter. And me running around like a lunatic, trying to buy whatever was needed on credit. And the original concept was it would be, I mean, I won't lie, we'd have good music and we'd bring in some rosé and we'd try to replicate what I'd seen be so successful in the south of France on a very, 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 very small budget. And it would be really tiny. I think the original business plan sort of hoped that we might do kind of lunch for 10 to 15 people a day. And it would be very much rooted in this Mediterranean experience. Very quickly, it began to morph and shift. Firstly, we were more successful than we thought we would be. It turned out that we weren't wrong. Um, People in Colombia do also like to come to the beach and sit at a table and use cutlery, and they don't have to sit on the ground. And they love to. I had some really fantastic Colombian clients who still come actually, and they said, coming here is a way for us to experience international culture without having to buy a ticket. And I think that's something that a lot of people in the global south will identify with. When your local culture becomes almost a theatre for external visitors and you are trapped in it. And that doesn't mean that you aren't proud of your local culture and it doesn't mean that you don't love it. But if you can imagine, I mean, you're from Yorkshire, if you were only allowed to eat fry-ups, fish and chips and go to the pub, and you were never allowed to do anything else, because if somebody opened an Indian restaurant or a sushi restaurant, people would say like, well, that's not respectful of local Yorkshire culture. I'm not sure how satisfied you feel with life. So it's finding that kind of balance between a cosmopolitan offer for local people and not being disrespectful.
Yeah.
And I think we ended up striking it quite well because all of our team are from the islands. We're all, I mean, apart from me, pretty much we're all Colombians. But it morphed, not away from, but I saw very early on something that I had never learned in yachting. Because in yachting, I'd been so far removed from everything, essentially. But just what community and society and life is like for a lot of people around the world. And that sounds, again, like I was a very ignorant person, and I was, and I still am. But I realized how powerful a business can be, even a small business, when it comes to providing opportunity for people that work there or suppliers, and how much more it is than a service for customers. And so quite quickly, Blue Apple became this sort of ecosystem, or I should say, I learned that a business is an ecosystem, and it has become as much about our clients as it has about our team, the village next door to us, the supply chain that we work with. And that is what has kept me here for as long as it has. And that has really shaped what the business has become since then.
Yeah. Talk a little bit more about that then, because again, you talk about it on the website. I've seen you in other places talking about community immersion and the power of community and how that helps build a business, and obviously in lots of other senses as well. So maybe you could just tell us a little bit more about how you think that works, how it's worked for you at Blue Apple, but then how you see it in travel in general as well, and the impact that it can have.
I mean, it's such a big question, and community is one of those words. It's a bit like sustainability. It's sort of bandied about all over the place, and I think often we don't think about what it means. And hopefully soon I'll come up with another word so that I can kind of re-engage our brains when we talk about it. But I don't know about you. I was born in the 80s in the UK, in the middle of a field. I didn't really have neighbours. So my first sense of I suppose community was going to university, and that very much does feel like a community. You live with your friends, you're interacting with lots of people all over the place. But when I left university, and I lived in London for about a minute before I got depressed, but you don't know your neighbour necessarily. You don't really talk to the people on the tube on the way to work. There's sort of disconnect between you and anyone that's not directly involved in your life. So, you know your colleagues because you work with them, but do you necessarily know your butcher, your baker, your candlestick maker? And living in France, it was kind of the same. And I think when you compare Colombian life, where it's quite normal to be in your 30s and 40s and live with your parents still, to me in the UK, age 17, well, I absolutely must leave home now and get as far away from my family as possible. Not because I hate them, but just because that's what you do. And it's almost like we live in this kind of very deconstructed society. And in Colombia, especially in Cartagena, and especially on this island, I just found something that was very, very, very different. And it's really important that you know your neighbors. Not least because when you know your neighbors, you don't have to invest quite as much money in security. Uh, but we realized that by opening this business next to a village, one option is to stick up a wall and say, you can't come in if you don't have a job here, or you can't come in if you're not a client. And that's a really good way to not develop a relationship. And when you develop a relationship, kind of doors open and things happen. And I suppose the best way to explain it is during the pandemic, we were closed, obviously. And there are lots of nice private houses around us. And one of the conversations in the group WhatsApp chat for the neighborhood was, is anyone else having issues with their TVs being nicked and their houses being looted while the island is uninhabited by us? And we were like, no, not at all, actually. I was living at Blue Apple at the time, and we didn't have any problems with security. Nothing got stolen. And that is because we are part of our community. And, we were also working with getting food to our team here because there's no market on the island. So we had a boat that was coming in from the mainland and bringing food, and our 50-odd team members and their families were coming and picking that up. It was because a lot of people in the village work here, or they were suppliers, and there was this lovely Spanish word, cariño. There's a sense of kind of warmth, kindness, connectivity between us and our neighbours. And again, that's a small light bulb moment. It's not, oh, we're really good to people and so people owe us something. It's just when we're all really nice to each other, life is a lot easier and people don't want to harm you. And so that is kind of on the sort of, I suppose, the very base level. But the other thing is when your team who work with you feel like they're part of you're all part of the same thing. Obviously, everyone works in a way that is much more contributive, and people are doing it not just to get their paycheck at the end of the day, but also because they believe in the project. And when you look at why we travel, yes, I'm sure some of us travel just because we're burnt out and we're tired, and we live in Yorkshire and it rains all the time and we need some sunshine. But a lot of the time we're traveling because we want to see, discover, have a connection with communities that are different from our own. We want to learn things. We want to see cultures that look different. And if you have a property or if you have a destination where there is a tangible, almost, physical sense of what community feels like, then when somebody comes in from New York and they're burnt out, or they come in from Yorkshire and they're desperate for a bit of sunshine, they also pick up on this collective human atmosphere and spirit. And that is what makes travel really interesting. I mean, yeah, travel is interesting if you travel around and you take pictures of lovely artworks and pieces of architecture. But travel is what do they say, transformative or, transcendental when you connect with other humans who are different from you. And it reminds you that we can all be different and at the same time, we can all be the same. And so for me, gosh, it sounds so cheesy, but community really is the fundamental of life, and being a happy adult, and thinking that people care about you and they don't want to harm you, and you likewise don't want to harm them. And you've got a reason to get out of bed in the morning. And it's not just making money. It's also because maybe there's somebody on your team who's just sent their kid to university and it's the first time anyone in their family's done that. Or maybe someone's just got their first passport and they're going off on their first international holiday and you're a part of that. And maybe it's because you're actually producing a tourism product which is doing its job, which is enabling people from different walks of life to connect with one another. And I love, I've got this anecdote because Jeff Bezos came to Apple for lunch one day, and he looked pretty miserable and he didn't leave a tip. And I'm pretty open about the fact that I don't much like Jeff Bezos' company, and he didn't win me over. But my bartender said to me at the end of the day, "That's the world's richest man, and who knows if he's the richest at the moment or if Elon's overtaken him or whatever." And he said, "And I'm so happy because I don't feel jealous or envious.
Yeah.
I feel really lucky that I've just served the world's richest man, and I'm pretty certain that my life is better than his."
Yeah.
And I just think, well, that's
How good's
actually
that?
quite literally better than an uncountable amount of dollars.
Yeah. Yeah, there's different versions of rich, right? There's
Yes, yeah, and
yeah,
different definitions of success.
yeah. You've obviously kind of fostered that culture. How would you recommend, if you're talking to a tour operator or another hotel somewhere, what would you advise in terms of ways that people can do that successfully? How can they immerse themselves in the community in the way that it feels like you have there? How can they do it in a way that is effective for the people around them, as well as from a sort of business success perspective? Yeah, any advice or tips that you can offer on that front?
Yeah, I think it's a two-step process. So that's an easy one to remember. The first step, and this stems from the fact that so the island where Blue Apple is called Tierra Bomba, and it's actually the biggest island close to Cartagena, and it's the closest. But when we opened here, there was nothing around us. Very, very few businesses on this island, and the ones that were here were all on the other side. And several of my Colombian friends' parents told their children, can you tell that crazy foreign woman not to open a beach club there because she's going to get murdered? The locals from that island are notoriously dangerous. First, they'll steal everything from her and then they'll murder her. And I don't know whether my friends just didn't like me very much, so they didn't tell me that, or whether they maybe had a more open mind than their parents. But nobody told me that. And I did open. And the step one of my two-step process to how to successfully build a community spirit is open the door. And so we opened the door and people from the village next door came by and they said, "Can we have a job?" And I said, "Well, thank God you need a job because I need a team. So this seems like a really good deal." And they didn't murder me. Many of them are actually still here. So I think if you open the door, you will find yourself very often surprised by the fact that the people on the other side of it are just like you, human. And just like you have things that they need and things that they can offer. And you can normally come to an arrangement with them that works. And if you can't, you can at least have a conversation with them and both understand why it isn't going to work. And step two, after having opened the door, is ask questions. And that is something that I think we are not taught to do in the global north when we come to places that we consider to be less developed and we think that we know everything. And I know that, the world of philanthropy has been kind of grappling with this for quite some time. Ask people what they want and what they need and what would be useful to them. And then decide if those things could also be useful for you and your business. And if they can, then do them. So, for example, with us, the local village sort of council said to us, well, it would be really useful for us if you would commit that more than 60% of your team could be from the local village. And we sat down and said, well, it would be really useful for us if almost everyone from the team works in the local village, because then we wouldn't have to build as much staff housing. So that's definitely what we call a win-win.
Yeah.
And it started from those very simple conversations. And now, for example, we have what we call an impact fund, where we used to ask, and we now force all of our guests to give an extra $1 on their bill. And that goes into our impact fund. And that's a fund that we keep separate from Blue Apple's income. And we sort of collected a bit of money, and we said to ourselves, oh, well, what should we do with this money? And then we sort of had the bright idea, well, why don't we ask the people who live next door to us, what would they like to do with this money? And we have a committee, and I know everyone hates the word committee, but this is a really cool one. We put posters up around the village, and we said if anyone would like to be in the committee, they can apply. And we just took some basic demographic details, so age, gender, whether they were employed or unemployed, whether they had family members working at Blue Apple or they didn't. And we had 8 baskets of demographic, and it was kind of male, female, under 30, over 50, connected to the property, not connected to the property, works in tourism, blah, blah, blah. And everyone that fits a demographic, we put their name in a basket, and then we just picked names out of the basket, and we ended up with a committee of 8 people. And then we added us to be number 9, so that there would never be an equal vote. And now every time we are asked to spend some money on something in the village, this committee of, very representative people vote, and they decide whether the project is or is not useful to the village. And we get 1 vote, which is our way of trying to be responsible with our customers' money. And it works really, really well. And I just can't really think of a different way of doing things now.
Yeah. Give us an example of the kind of things you've done from that, then, I guess, decisions that have been made, things that you've done.
It's really, and that's what's super fascinating, is when you speak to people in philanthropy, they'll often sort of say, well, yeah, our fund likes to focus on, wildlife conservation, or our fund focuses on children. And this impact fund focuses on absolutely nothing at all. And we have given money towards things that might be disaster relief. So if there have been extreme weather conditions and roads need to be repaired in the village, we might send funds to that. We have sent local football players to tournaments in other cities because they might not have otherwise been able to afford the bus ride or the airfare there. We've contributed to perhaps the local clinic to buy medical supplies. We've contributed to a local outdoor cinema project because there's no cinema on the islands, which actually in turn led to us doing a monthly, because we've got a small outdoor cinema here on the hotel, doing a monthly session where local kids can come and watch a film here. It's been very, very diverse. It's not a fund that is generally used to do kind of big long-term projects. So far, mostly because people from the local community haven't really asked us to come and do something, or the fund that they need are so big that we haven't been able to cover it. But I think sometimes just being that kind of fast, easily accessible money that can solve an immediate problem and allow people to get on with their lives. And we don't ask for any paperwork, we don't ask for any reporting, we just ask for a photograph once they've spent the money so we can see that it actually happens. But we try to make it as friction-free as possible. And it's a really interesting project that has actually taught us a lot about what our community needs.
Yeah. And I guess when it's on the scale of local community, like you say, a lot of the time people can get carried away with the reporting and the administration and all the things around it, and you end up spending more time on trying to work out what the impact is in some sort of ethereal numbers, rather than just sort of talking to the person over the road and saying like, oh, was that a good thing? Are we all happy with the good thing? Yeah, it's a good thing. Like, on to the next one.
Are you guys happy? Was that useful? Is there anything we'd do differently the next time?
Yeah.
It's really, really simple conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, love that. I guess kind of tied to this from, you mentioned sustainability earlier and, community and these words that sort of have come to not really mean anything. One of the things I've heard you talking about is like profitable sustainability and making sustainability profitable. And then you've talked about equitable tourism as well, which is, I guess, sort of crossing over with some of the stuff that we're talking about. Tell us a little bit more about that. How do you frame that? Because I guess sometimes sustainability can be a bit of a, anchor for people where it's like, oh, I've got to do that sustainability thing and tick that box over here.
Right. Sustainability is waste, water, and energy, right? Which is, it's also just kind of like classic human. If you're not profitable, you're actually not sustainable. If you cannot sustain your business by being able to pay your team and yourself, and your suppliers, then you aren't sustainable. So this sort of strange habit that we had or got into, I don't know, 10 years ago, of associating sustainability only with essentially some quite basic environmental measures, um, is kind of unfortunate. And for me, that's been a huge distraction of the word sustainability. And it's why internally we don't really use it. We use words like impact. We've been known to use words like regeneration. So we try to be thoughtful with our language. Um, to me, and I've completely ripped this off from other platforms and frameworks like B-Corp or what have you, but this idea of a triple bottom line where we don't separate money from other things is really important. And it's something that, again, I will always reference the fact that I was born in the 80s, and Reagan and Thatcher ruled the world. Well, ruled the world that I grew up in. And it was all about separating human from nature. I mean, the fact that we even have this two kind of opposing concepts, that something is either natural or it's man-made. And if you go and see I don't know, like a beaver's dam, you don't see that dam and go, well, that's not natural because a beaver made it. It's part of the wonder of the natural world. And we've managed to convince ourselves that we are not of the natural world, which has led us to all sorts of problems. And we've done the exact same with money. We've managed to convince ourselves that money must be considered separate from all other forms of measurable. And so we try to look at our business and ask ourselves, is it successful in a way that is not just financial? And because I love to pick on Jeff, I would say Amazon is a business which is extremely successful financially, obviously, although for many years apparently it wasn't. But I ask myself, if I think about this concept of triple bottom, so has it furthered society, bettered society, made the world a fairer place for humans? Has it improved social equality? I haven't done a study of Amazon, but I'm sort of, it's maybe made some things a bit more accessible to people. So you could argue that, yeah, there's been some social positivity there, but overall, I'm just going to heftily come down on the side of no. And has Amazon had an environmentally positive impact on the world in which we live? I think you could argue that the fact that it's actually used the name of the most important rainforest in the world would be one way of saying that it hasn't. But I think we could relatively easily argue that Amazon has not had a positive environmental impact. So to me, that's out of three buckets, it's only ticking one. I would call that a fail. And I would say that is not a successful business. And it is not successful because it is not successful for the world. And in the world, I'm going to include humanity. It has been a business that has been successful for its founders, for its shareholders. I understand that many of its shareholders are pension funds, and that in and of itself is complicated because, of course, it does impact people beyond its, kind of Jeff and his buddies. But for me to look at a business and argue, is it successful or not, you've got to be thinking about, is it positively impacting society? Hopefully its local community, if that's a feasible possibility. And is it doing something useful environmentally? And that's how we operate. And it's hard because, you're in a world where people love to measure you financially, and often making the right decision costs a little bit of more money up front. But then again, in our particular case, we bought some solar panels a few years ago, and that was a big capital investment. And then energy prices shot up. And now I spend half the amount of money on my energy prices as the hotel next door to me. And we bought a water desalination machine. We bought a very nice energy efficient one, which has really, really good environmental credentials and has no negative environmental impact, also because the water that we're going through is a drop in the ocean, relatively speaking. And that is instead of water that comes on a diesel powered barge to Blue Apple. And we are saving money with that water. And it's also environmentally better, and it enables the people that work here to drink better quality water. And if we have any excess water, then people from the local town can come and take it away with them. So it's rare that we've made a decision that's environmental and social that hasn't also eventually been a better financial decision for us in the long run. So to me, it's impossible to separate them.
You've said, and you're kind of leaning into it there, the doing the right thing is good for business. And I think that's that's something we've thought about a lot with the 100% stuff that we do. I'm kind of quite vocal when I talk to people about that there is self-interest there. It's kind of like, oh, we're doing this thing that has a positive impact, we believe, with the charities that we support, but it also gives us a marketing message. It appeals to clients. It appeals to the team that we work with. There's all sorts of kind of benefits that come to us with that I believe is good for our business and our team and the people that we work with in lots of different ways. So yeah, it sounds like you're saying the same thing there, of like the benefits that have come from thinking about that things in that way.
Yeah, I mean, working with people who are happy, also, lo and behold, makes your day happier. And sharing in people's success. I think you don't have to be a particularly nice person to feel good when you see something nice happen to somebody else. I think that's why everybody likes to watch the Olympics, and it's why everybody loves to support the underdog. And so to build that into your day to day as a business owner, to me, it's actually really a selfish act. And something else I've been caught on camera saying is that I'm not a very nice person, and I'm not motivated by being altruistic or being selfless. And I really do wake up in the morning and I want to look out for number one. And the absolute best way to look out for number one is by making your environment as attractive as possible. And by making all the people, or contributing to all the people who immediately contact your life, to being as happy as possible. Because then you will reduce your stress levels and generally enjoy things a lot more. And I think altruism, and I actually was speaking to someone the other day who, I hesitate to say it, but he is a billionaire with a B, and I hope people won't hate me for having a friend that's a billionaire. I am constantly trying to convince him to give as much of his money away to people as possible. And he does a very good job of it. But he said, I kind of said that. I was like, I'm not doing this to be nice and suffering while I do it. It's deeply enjoyable. And he's in his 60s, and he said, you know what? That's something that I wish I had learned earlier, because I spent most of my life focusing on making money and being pretty miserable, and probably making a lot of other people pretty miserable. And then I realized how nice it is to make the people around me happy, and how much happier I am. So I thought, well, look at that. I've learned something without having had to have made $1 billion.
Quiet tips from billionaires. Take them on board.
No, I was giving him a tip.
That you mentioned earlier about the business where you then had a load of people to then employ and create work for in some shape or form. And we've talked about culture a little bit and things. How do you create a culture where 10 people want to follow you to the new thing that you're setting up when it's not even built yet?
I mean, it's probably step 3 of the step 2 program, right? Open the door, ask questions. And step 3 is probably act like a human. I'm actually a bit embarrassed when members of my team will say, I really love working with you because you're one of the nicest bosses I've ever had. And I think, like, that doesn't say anything about me. That just says a lot about how dreadful a lot of companies are. I was very fortunate, and this is why I do. to put a shout out to my yachting past, I worked in a company where my boss was a human and he was respectful of all of us and we felt like we were working together. Yes, we worked for him in the sense that he paid our salaries and decided the general direction in which we were headed, but it felt like a team job. And I suppose I don't like football and I don't know anything about it, but everybody else does, and you've got a captain, but I don't think the other players say to themselves, I'm playing for this captain. I think they will think we're playing, together. But the captain's in charge. And I think that's the way I run my businesses. So I guess people come with me because we're a team. We're not in opposition. And this is something we see a lot in Colombia. And I think you do see it a bit I certainly saw it in France as well. When I worked there, I've not really worked a lot in the UK. But this idea that the company and the employee are at odds with one another and that, they're both sort of constantly trying to screw the other one in some way or another. The company's trying to exploit the employee and the employee's sneakily taking long lunch breaks and stealing pens from the stationery cupboards. And I sort of always try to explain to my team, especially in hospitality where you have a tip culture, right? You guys are shareholders in this business. When we talk about profits, that's what's left after having paid everybody else. So if the company does well, there's more money to pay you. In our case, when we have a good day of sales, tips are 10% of that. So that is actually a dividend. And so I work quite hard to try and change the narrative around employer, employees, working for, working with, and sort of remind ourselves constantly that we do have this common goal. But that does involve a lot of kind of breaking down of preconceptions, because if somebody's 30 years old and they've spent their life working in companies where they've very much been exploited and their form of survival is to nick as many pens from the stationery cupboard as they can, there's a little bit of kind of reticence to believe, like, is this true, or is this person just making this up to sneakily exploit me without me noticing? And the only way to prove it is just to deliver time and time again. So yeah, and that can be, and I'm sure this has happened to you, being transparent about the company's finances, your team knowing how much. So that was something that we put in with B-Corp. I put a cap on how much the company can make. So I said that the company cannot pay out dividends to its shareholders where any one shareholder receives more than 20 times more than the lowest paid worker. And that was something that we nicked from B-Corp, because I thought that makes it not embarrassing for me to talk about my company's numbers to my team.
Yeah.
And that makes it not embarrassing to say, well, this is what sales were, this is what profits were, this is what I took out. If you can't talk about it, it's probably because you're embarrassed by it.
Yeah.
And if you're embarrassed by it, it's probably because it's not okay.
Yeah. The rules are pretty simple on that thing, aren't they? It's like you say, if you think about it that way, it's quite easy to see what you should be doing. It's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Or how do I feel a bit dodgy about it? Ooh,
and if you
maybe I
don't feel
shouldn't.
dodgy, if you decide to say, well, look, I'm perfectly okay with the fact that my net worth went up $1 million last year and my lowest paid employee made $10,000, and you feel cool with that, and you put it out there in the world like Jeff does, and people decide to work for you, then I suppose arguably you could say, at least you're being transparent.
Yeah, it's up to them. Yeah,
exactly. But then those people will maybe nick the pens from the stationery cupboard.
Yeah. Well, that's where mission and things come into it as well, isn't it? Like if there is a broader mission and purpose to what you're doing, and positive impact and motivation for the team to be behind things, then they're not going to want to nick the pens, and they're not going to want to sneak off on lunch and things, because they're like, oh, we're all here to go and do that
we're
thing.
All in it together.
Yeah, it's not about filling Jeff's pockets or buying another yacht for the owner or something like that. It's like, oh no, it's all going into that other thing there. And people talk about purpose and mission a lot, but to me, that's back to the selfish motivation of these things. It's like, oh, it just makes me rest easy with our team, because I'm just like, well, if you're going to screw this place, then know that it's not me that you're screwing. Like, you're screwing
It's yourself.
like kids who don't have the bed, and it's kids who don't have a school, and there's like it's
You've
like
really
a
taken
big
it one step further.
yeah, I know, yeah, but do you know, that's what we're all here to do. We're here to like do a good thing, have a positive impact. You've got the team there that are that like you're saying, the positive impact that it has on the community. And so if someone comes along and starts doing things which negatively impact the business, then it's got to go downstream to the community and self-regulate a little bit with the team, because they won't want to watch other things like that happen, so they'll pick each other up on it. I don't know, I just feel like it
Absolutely, yeah. So we've got in Colombian Spanish, so if you in English, if you say someone's a snitch, you say that they rat, they're a rat, right? They rat people out. But in Colombia, you call them a sapo, which is a toad. So people will say, oh, it's a really toady thing to do. If you spot your colleague nicking a pen, and then you go to the boss and you say, well, Bob was nicking pens this morning. But we have this thing in Blue Apple, and it's called the Sapo Feliz, the happy toad. And it's about kind of self-regulation. And you don't have to go to the boss. You actually might go to your colleague and just say, mate, that's probably not super helpful for the whole team, right?
Yeah.
And they, our guys now will sort of, if somebody is consistently doing the wrong thing, and then they say to them, you're not really playing the game. It's like, oh, stop being such a toad. They'll actually say, well, I'm a happy toad. And I'm in this for the greater good. And by the way, when you talk about mission and vision, so in Colombia, by law, every company has to put on its website, what's our mission and what's our vision. It took me about 3 years to understand the difference between the two. I think somebody told me that your vision is the future world that you see, and your mission is the role you play in it, or something. And I've still not entirely understood it. So we just sort of simplified ours, and it's to have a nice time in a nice place. For everyone, right? So that's guests, us, suppliers, like, have a nice time in a nice place. And it's not save the world. It's not, provide beds for children specifically. But if providing a bed for a child is going to help them have a nicer time and help their place be nicer, then yeah, that's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
And I think keeping things really, really simple sometimes helps to put them into practice.
And that works, when you're talking about the things that you do in the community and the flexible nature of that. Obviously, you don't want to pin something very specific, do you? Because that's not how it works. It's like, well, hang on, what if they vote for something different next year?
Exactly.
Then what?
Yeah.
We've got to change our mission
Needs
again.
change, right?
Yeah. So one of the things that I noted down that I wanted to talk to you about was like hospitality. What's good hospitality? Because clearly you've set up, that's what your business runs on, like giving people, and it's so interesting to hear the mission there, which plays so nicely into that. What do you view as good hospitality?
This question is so perfect, because I've been asked to help a friend improve sales in a place that they have in some islands close by to here. And so I toddled off there this weekend to go and see it and see what we could do, because they didn't have great sales for the last 3 years, and they've not been making money. And by no means do I think I'm some kind of magical guru. I mean, I'm asking myself the question every single day: how can we improve sales and be more stable and more robust? And so it's not like I'm saying, oh yeah, absolutely, I'll go down there and give you the magic answer. But I sort of went in and felt immediately quite depressed, because I saw a place which you can build when you've got some serious capital, and just absolutely every single piece of it is nicer than Blue Apple. Like, the chairs are nicer, the beds are nicer, the windows are a better quality glass. It's not 5-star, it's like 7-star. And I went in, and the first thought was like, how on earth is this place not full the whole time? Because it is just, I mean, what a privilege to be here. This place is off the charts. Like, it makes the Four Seasons feel like a Marriott. And I'm going to get into so much trouble with so many big brands after this.
You're giving me all the headlines. It's great. These are the clips I'll pick.
And I spent 2 nights there. And they were a group of us. I went out with my chef and with a bartender and with my head of sales and with my guest experience team. And by the end of it, we were sort of desperate to leave. And somebody said, I feel like I'm kind of I'm trapped, or it's the apocalypse has happened or something, and I found the world's nicest house, and I'm sort of trapped here waiting for the world to end because there was absolutely no service. And I don't say service like, no one offered us a glass of water and we didn't get food. I mean, we sort of did, but you could tell that everyone that was working there was just sort of trying to tick a box. And it was like, well, when they arrive, apparently we've got to give them a glass of water and we've sort of got to wrap it up with a little paper towel, and maybe we've got to bow, but there was no humanity or feeling behind it. And it got to the stage, it's not the first time I've seen this, but it was what I call kind of like awkward hospitality, where at one point one of the guys said to us, like, it was 5 p.m. and we were going back up to the rooms, and he was like, so do you think you'll need anything before 7:30 when you come down for dinner? And of course, we're all really nice people, but except for me, I'm not nice, so I didn't. But everyone just said, oh, no, that's okay, thanks. And I was outraged. I was like, what? This is a hotel. What do you mean, are you going to need something in the next 2.5 hours? Your job is to anticipate anything that we might need in the next 2.5 hours and magically kind of appear there. And I don't say this in a, you've got to be servile. I mean, if your guests were in your home, you wouldn't say to them, do you think you're going to need something? You would just constantly be taking care of them. For me, good hospitality is treating the place where you work as if it is your own home. And maybe in this instance, it's much nicer than my own home. But treating it as your own home, and that every single person in that space, be they a paying guest, a colleague, a supplier who's dropping off a bag of ice, treat them as if they are a guest in your home. And if you do that, I just don't think you can go wrong.
Yeah.
And again, it's not a complicated concept. So you can imagine the training at Blue Apple. It is that. It doesn't last for very long.
No.
The training is, welcome to Blue Apple. This is now your home. Please treat everybody in it as you would. And if it's an older person, treat them like your granny. And if it's a younger person, treat them like your cousin. And if it's a slightly scary, mean person that doesn't speak the same language as you, treat them as your mother-in-law. Like, and that's it. It's not rocket science.
The awkward hospitality thing is right on the money. It is, like you say, it's not service. That's the people think it's giving things and receiving things. It's like a feeling, isn't it? It's that comfort that you can relax without
exactly
sort of worrying about something.
And you're not causing it. So this guy says, do you think you're going to need anything next 2.5 hours? The only polite way to answer that is to say, no, please don't worry about it.
Yeah.
So of course that's what we all did. And then we spent the next 2.5 hours thinking, God, I wish I had a beer.
Don't ask that guy. Yeah, no, he's already asked us.
But we've let him go off, and he's sort of got in his head now that he doesn't have to do anything for the next 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
And you do see more and more. Hospitality has a tendency to get more and more awkward the higher up the star rating it goes, right? And the more rules come into play. And look, I understand if you're going for dinner with King Charles, that there are a bunch of rules, and you've really got to know, the servers have got to know that they're serving from one side and they're clearing from another, and the cutlery goes from this way in, and actually the guests have got to know that as well, because you're all in a big ritual, right? But when you're on holiday, you shouldn't really have to be worrying about that. And when you're on holiday somewhere like Tierra Bomba, the island where I am, and you have an understanding that many of the people that work on this island, firstly, there's not that much opportunity for employment. So they're really fortunate to have a good job. And maybe they didn't finish school, let alone go to a hospitality training school. So maybe they're going to serve from the wrong side and clear from the wrong side, or, maybe they're not going to remember to put the little paper towel around the glass. But you've just said, does that really matter?
No.
At the end of the day, have I got a cool beverage in my hand? Was the food delicious? And did I actually have a conversation with the guy that was taking care of me? And did I learn something about Colombia through his eyes or his life? And I think for me, that's just always more important than rituals. It's
like the word luxury as well, isn't it? Like, people talk about what luxury is, and this perception of the white gloves and the butler and all the fancy things. And it's like, for me at least, luxury is when I can just sit and relax in an environment I'm comfortable in and be able to get the things that I want to get in whatever period of time I want to get them.
Right. Yeah.
And
Feel taken care of.
and feel taken care of. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think that gets lost a lot in travel when you talk about it, and or when people are thinking about how to target their audience, when they want high spenders and they frame what that means and how
Yeah.
they
And
target them.
we sort of have all these wonderful words like filter, how do we filter our markets? Luxury and my other pet peeve is exclusive. So I'm always thinking whenever somebody writes on their website and they're in luxury travel, and they write, this is an exclusive property or something. And I think, could you just go back and remind yourself where the word exclusive comes from? It comes from the word to exclude.
Yeah.
How can you have a hospitality concept that is built on exclusion? Like, how can you say we're all about making people feel welcome and start from the premise that we're excluding people?
Yeah.
I understand that everybody's got a target market and we're all filtering because we want to have a nice atmosphere. So you want to have people that get along with each other in the same property. But start with inclusion and work out, once people have been included, are they going to get along with each other?
Yeah.
So there's a couple of words that we try not to use, and you're the SEO experts, although we could no longer know that from your brand name. But I often wonder if you get punished on SEO by not using words like luxury and exclusive and sustainability on your website. But I would sort of hope that people would stop using them.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, like you say, it's who you want to appeal to, and understanding a certain amount of people will use a certain amount of words, and you've got to decide if you want to be found by the people who are searching for those words. And
Right.
So for us, with the brand name change and all these things, like, it is kind of going back to that first thing and understanding your audience. And once you know your audience, then you can zone into the language that they would use that correlates with the language you're going to use most likely. And then you hone into that. So if you don't like a word, probably you don't want the people who are using the word.
I think what we managed to do with luxury, because we know that there's not a lot of great words. So if you're looking for a sort of high-end place, I think what we managed to do is we put it in inverted commas and said, this isn't luxury as you might have imagined it.
Yeah. Luxury is a funny one, because I guess because it is so different to everyone, that the concept of it, maybe 25% of the people who use the word luxury are the right kind of luxury for whatever you are at what level. So you still want to be found by those 25 people, but you then have to sort of qualify when people find you. What does this mean? Does this mean there's a butler and a chauffeur and all these things? Yeah, exactly. Or is it that you can lie on the beach with your feet on the sand and you can get a beer whenever you want a beer and have a chat with someone with, no qualms kind of thing. So, luxury has definitely always been a harder one to navigate. And because it is way more commonly used than, again, exclusive, you get all these versions, bespoke, tailor-made, all of that is versions of the same thing. It's just someone thinks about it differently.
Poor old travel, constantly trying to reinvent ourselves.
They keep us on our toes. Give us the hospitality stuff. I just think is so useful for people to hear how you've honed that and how you talk about that in the team. Is there anything else that you would recommend, if there's hoteliers listening to this, that you think has kind of aided you in your growth and your success? Because obviously there's other properties like this, the Townhouse as well, that you've talked about some of the things that you're helping with. What have you learned about hotels that you think would help anyone who's listening to this improve what they offer?
I would start with asking yourself why you're doing it. Because ultimately we're all selling, if you're a hotelier, we're all selling the same thing, right? So we're all selling a place to sleep, some food to eat, how to have a nice time in a nice place. We started Blue Apple because we couldn't find something that we were looking for. And we started Townhouse for the same reason. When we opened Townhouse, Cartagena was absolutely killing it on the boutique hotel front. And every single boutique hotel was ultra romantic. It was like it was always Valentine's Day. And very, very, I mean, so gorgeous. All these old converted colonial mansions. But if you were going out and coming back at 3 a.m. and you're a bit drunk, there was sort of raised eyebrow. But if you were a group of friends traveling, it was kind of, did you fit in? Was there a bar that you could sit in the hotel where you could actually meet other people? So we opened Townhouse to cater for that need, actually for a lot of our friends that were coming to visit us at the time and a lot of young people that were coming down for weddings. And when I opened the Pink Mango, which is my teeny weeny little Caribbean beach shack on the other side of the island, it's nothing like Blue Apple or Townhouse. It's just a lunch spot. But we opened that because we were beginning to see that a lot of our team and then other like hospitality workers in Cartagena who were working at high-end places were going on their day off to their places of work because it was the only place where they could get good quality service, good quality food, and with their staff discounts at a price that was affordable. But that's obviously not super healthy. So we kind of created the Pink Mango using the same principles as Blue Apple, but just with a much more pared down infrastructure. But same operating principles, same chef, same supply chain values. So you could have the same quality food, the same careful service, but in a place that didn't cost you that much money. And something that I have seen in the last 10 years is a plethora of hoteliers, beach club owners opening businesses because they've seen that we are successful and saying, that looks like a cool business. They seem to be doing very well, so I'm going to do it. And that is absolutely the worst reason, in my eyes, to open a business, and especially a hospitality business. So I would say if you can't answer the question, why am I doing this beyond to make money, don't do it. And until you can answer that question in a way that is really precise, don't do it. So who is your client? Why are they choosing you over somebody else? Because there's a lot of competition and it can all get really samey. And if you open a property that hasn't got really, and it's an annoying phrase, but hasn't got a USP, isn't speaking to a specific market, isn't answering a question that someone is asking, you're just diluting the market and confusing customers and actually causing harm. So that's kind of, I suppose, yeah, step 4, ask yourself why you're doing it and make sure that the answer is not just to make money. And then just stay really, really true to that. The answer can change. So I opened Blue Apple because I wanted to drink rosé and listen to music on the beach. And today I want to continue to operate Blue Apple and I want to expand it in a certain way because I want it to continue to challenge the status quo of hospitality, provide opportunity for people that otherwise might not have it, and continue to provide a place for people to have a nice time. So it's shifted, but I still have a purpose. And the day I don't have a purpose that I can articulate is the day that I ought to get out of the game.
Yeah. What have been the biggest challenges along the way? What have you bumped into that's made you think again or consider your options?
Well, one thing about hotels, which anyone in, I suppose agents would also tell you the same thing, the 24-hour nature of the job, it's fine for the founder. I mean, entrepreneurs are all total lunatics, and I think our businesses become like children, so we're thinking about them all the time anyway. But creating a place where it's healthy for staff to be, that is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, is a challenge. So we don't have a GM in any of our properties because we didn't understand, we couldn't work out how to put that much weight on one person. And actually, I just came back from visiting a 65-room hotel in the islands, not the one from my friend, but another one. And I was speaking to the manager, who's a really young guy, and he's in his early 20s, and he's been there for 10 months. And I was asking him, how is it? And he said, it was pretty intense. And he said, a couple of weeks ago, we had some really bad weather. And we couldn't get boats to and from the island. We couldn't get a car to and from the peninsula. And we couldn't use our helipad because the winds were so strong. We had 80 people on site and we were running out of food and water. And he was like, by the end of that 3 days, I was pretty much ready to run screaming into the hills. because he was carrying that on his own.
Yeah.
And that's something I think in the industry that should be radically interrogated. The concept, and I know people will say, yeah, but you've got the AGM, but that's still essentially putting all the responsibility on one or two people. So that's just definitely been a challenge, but I love a challenge. And then the other thing for us, I think this will maybe resonate with people that are operating in relatively inverted commas new destinations. So Colombia has had, it doesn't really have an idea of what it is yet in terms of what the tourism market looks like. It's had years of insane growth because it's finally open and everybody wants to come and see it, and it's a bucket list destination. And then a bucket list destination, of course, means that once people have seen it, they think they don't need to come back. And it's finding its feet. What kind of a destination is it? Is it, Costa Rica's got their brand, Cuba's got their brand, like Colombia's got so many things to offer, and it's sort of finding its feet. So we've been navigating that, and we see that the market changes every single year. Obviously, we threw in a pandemic for some extra fun. And then again, for people who are operating, I think, in the global south, in the last 5 years, we've seen inflation compound inflation of over 50%. At the same time as we've seen the value of the dollar, which massively impacts us, fall by about 30%. So that is a huge squeeze on margins. So these are kind of macroeconomic things, but they do affect your business. And so navigating, I would say, kind of uncertainty. And sometimes I go, I wish I had a hotel in Venice. And I just knew that exactly this many people would be coming in the door and they'd be spending exactly this much money. I mean, our numbers do this. But then that's all part of the excitement of living here. It's never boring.
Yeah. Venice will be underwater soon. Then you want to be back to Colombia.
Cartagena is also actually underwater, so we need the Dutch to come in and teach us how to put out.
What's the answer to the GM question then? Because that's an interesting idea of that usual structure and I guess hierarchical type thing. But there's the challenge there that if you don't have someone to do that, is it chaos? Like who's in charge? Who's the captain running the ship? Does it all just fall on you as the leader? Because if no one else is doing it, it tends to be you.
Right. I think it's going back to the football team. I've never used football twice as an analogy. But if the captain gets injured in a game and comes off, I guess the question is it all chaos? And the answer is probably, well, if he's a crap captain and it's a poorly trained team, then yes. But if she's good at her job and it's a well-trained team and they've worked together well, then probably everyone steps up. And that is our current approach. So we have a series of managers in charge of different things. So we've got our exec chef, our exec bartender, our head of guest experience, head of reservations, head of impact, actually. She's one of our senior management. So it's kind of like our C-suite. And each one of them does a night on duty. And during that night, they are the captain of the ship. And actually, what's been a cool, unexpected side effect is that everybody's learned something about other people's jobs. Because at any given moment, the head of impact might be dealing with somebody complaining about the food, or the head of HR might have a guest who's suddenly sick and he needs to understand how the head of operations gets an emergency services responder here. And people have become more empathetic with each other. There's a deeper level of understanding and connection between what everybody does. And everybody, I think, to kind of save me there, everybody knows what it feels like to be in charge. And so there's a lot more kindness towards the owner of the company. That's like, well, we shouldn't really let Portia carry all this all the time. So I'm pretty happy with how it is at the moment. Doesn't mean that we've solved it for good, but yeah, good teamwork. I won't say it removes the need for leadership, and I'm definitely here as a figurehead. But it feels like a psychologically safer place to be.
Yeah. We've spent a lot of time in our business talking about structure, hierarchy, self-management, autonomy, all these different kind of phrases. So it's always interesting when you hear stories of how places are structured, and that sounds different to the norm and all the reasons that you've said. that responsibility and the ownership and things that come with it all make everyone better at their individual responsibilities, I guess, when they then go back to it.
Exactly. And that we kind of try to combine that with this idea of the inverse hierarchy. So it's not that when you get to the top, you're all powerful. It's more like when you're at the bottom of the triangle, you carry the responsibility. So you ask people, how far down the triangle do you want to go? And higher wages are actually compensation for more responsibility rather than a reward for more power.
Yeah.
And phrasing it that way has actually caused some of our people to say, yeah, you know what? I think I'm pretty happy. I think I'm pretty happy with where I am right now.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily want to go down the triangle.
Yeah. Yeah. Love that. Love that. I'm stealing that tomorrow.
And you know this, like, as your job as a leader is really to create the environment for everybody else to be able to do their job well. And that was another thing I learned from my first boss, my super yachting boss. He was like, I just make sure that everybody I hire is better at what they do than I am. And then he's sort of like, my job is just kind of a conductor, but also the water boy, and just make sure that everybody's got what they need to perform.
Yeah. Yeah. Tell me what you think are your personal qualities that have enabled you to do what you've done then. What's you're talking about leaders and how you facilitated what you're doing. Yeah. Is there anything that stands out where you're like, oh, I think because I'm this way out and made this way, or things you've done that have been particularly beneficial along the way?
I mean, there's definitely a lot of answers to that question. In a very, very concise way, I've talked about this with other people in similar positions. I think there are two qualities that help, and that one is discipline and the other is curiosity. And I think if you're somebody that constantly asks questions about why things are the way they are, and you apply discipline to that curiosity, so you really, and I've used the word interrogate, but you really interrogate your ideas of everything, the ideas of the people around you, the way your industry is set up, the way your business is set up, you will discover truths that will then help you to kind of shape the kind of person you want to be and the kind of people you want to work with and the kind of atmosphere that you want to create. And then obviously like a healthy dose of ego. And we can call it self-confidence, ego. I don't know whether you see it as negative or positive, but I think growing up, we didn't really mention it today, but it's something that obviously does influence who I am. Like growing up as a mixed race person in an entirely white environment, and having to sort of thrive, and it not necessarily being super easy, but not thinking too much about that, just getting on with it. And then I studied Japanese and I lived in Japan back in the days when there was no internet. So I was on my own and survived that. And I think that kind of level of knowing that we are resilient as opposed to ego, and knowing that you probably can get through everything. And I think, yeah, being a natural outsider by birth gives. So I think a lot of entrepreneurs will probably say that they are maybe people that didn't fit in. So the status quo wasn't really designed for them. So they kind of went off and just sort of worked out their own.
Yeah.
So yeah, I suppose call it ego if you'd like to. I'd like to think about it more maybe as resilience or self-confidence or a firm belief in or a conviction in your beliefs. And I think that comes from being weighted in curiosity. So generally the opinions I have, I've thought about them. I don't say them because my dad told me that the world looked like this. They're a result of kind of investigations and self-questioning.
Yeah. I've heard you talk or mention stubbornness in there as well, like, which I guess ties into that a little. Well, maybe that's self-belief branded less well.
Yeah, but I think we do have to be stubborn, but also know when to give. And I mean, a donkey is a great example. They are stubborn, but they do also move. It's rare that I die on a hill, and normally there's I'm a Libra, and I don't know if you believe in this stuff, but apparently we always try to look for compromises and try to keep both sides of the equation happy. So I think I'm sort of going to say resilience over stubbornness. I am a stubborn person, but I can budge.
Yeah.
But it will be after a lot of interrogating. And if the other person is not curious, then I'll tend to sort of
Yeah.
sideline them.
There's I don't know who to attribute this to, but I've heard people talk, it's like the strong beliefs held loosely. Like, so you're
Oh, that's
always
very
open to
nice.
change.
Yeah, I should steal that.
Yeah. And I fall into that category as well. You mentioned your dad there. A really nice thing I think you mentioned it in our last conversation, was about how you go on a big trip with your dad once a year.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about I guess what you do, because as you touched on earlier, you can end up with a lot of weight on your shoulders when you're running businesses and responsible for lots of people and things like that. Tell us a bit more about what you do outside of work to decompress. That sounds like a lovely thing to get away from it all. Like, maybe it's not, I don't know, but yeah, I don't know. That sounded just like a nice example of it and a nice thing to do.
No, it is. Well, so I read two things happened kind of at the same time, just before the pandemic. One is that my Trinidadian grandmother, so my mum's mum, passed away, not from COVID, but she was in her 90s nearly. And no one in the family had a Trinidadian passport at the time, except for me. And I was also geographically the most well placed. So I sort of went over to Trinidad to deal with everything and sort of, I don't know, affairs and administration and sell her home. And it was not a big home and it wasn't worth a huge amount of money. But the money couldn't go anywhere other than into a bank account in my name, which I was obviously thrilled about. But because I'm not the world's worst daughter, I did say to my family, don't worry, I won't keep it all. But I made my family all sign up to this pact that I wouldn't let them have the money unless it was used to spend time with each other. Because around the same time, I read a statistic that now this is Northern European children, by the time they're 18, will have spent 90% of the time that they'll ever spend with their parents. And the rest of their life is just 10%. And so I said, like, we've got this little pot of money, and it's not really enough to be a life-changing amount for anyone. If my sister gets it, she'll just buy a Volvo and do something very boring with it. My dad will probably put it into some kind of fund and think about everybody's great grandchildren and how necessary it is for them. And my mum will probably spend it on food for my brother. But I'm insisting that we use it as a family. And they all agreed. Everyone didn't have any choice because I'm a little dictator and I kept hold of it. The stubbornness. And so basically we all use it to travel together. And the only rules are you have to be traveling with at least one member of the family that can't be your spouse. So my mum and dad just can't go on extravagant holidays together. My sister can't go off with my brother-in-law. And so yeah, every year we do. Often I go with just my dad, but we've done a couple also with my mum. We haven't done one the whole family together yet. But my father always thought that he hated travel. And we discovered, didn't hate travel. He hates airports. And he hates feeling lost and unconnected and feeling like a rando tourist wandering around the place, not understanding where he is. And Katie, actually, one of the founders of the Conscious Travel Foundation, put together our first couple of trips. And we went to India together and we went to Bhutan together. And then subsequently we've been to Italy. And this year we went to Botswana and Zambia and the Seychelles. And I think the fund is now gone. And my dad is just sort of like, let's just carry on doing this because it's so nice. And for me, it's lovely because I get to go on amazing trips most of the time, visiting friends from the industry. And I get to see a man who's in his late 70s doing something that he always thought he would hate. And I've gotten to know my dad, not as my dad, through those trips. I've gotten to know him as a person. And I've seen how open-minded he is and how curious he is. And he's, my dad looks a bit like King Charles. I mean, he's kind of your stereotypical posh white man. And I was a bit nervous, like, oh God, is he going to say all the wrong things and, kind of insult people? And it's just really amazing, actually, to see. And I realize that's probably where I get a lot of who I am from. So that's one thing, is kind of, I suppose, intentional travel.
Yeah.
And what else do I do? Probably not as much as I'd like to, but my two favorite things in the world are riding a horse, and going really fast down a hill on a pair of skis. So I do either of those whenever I can. Going on a horseback safari last year was pretty much the highlight of my life.
Where did you
Galloping
do
through the
that?
Okavango Delta in Botswana.
Okay, right.
And it was just, I mean, wow. Wow. Um, and yeah, I'm building a little house here on the island, so that my parents can actually retire here.
Mm,
So I guess community building, a little bit of adrenaline,
yeah,
and reminding myself how important family is.
yeah.
I do a lot of nonprofit stuff as well, not because I'm a nice person, but I say community building. Yeah, just trying to continue to like create a community in which I want to grow old. So there's not an awful lot of non-work. I'd say the lines are quite blurred.
Mm. Well, I guess if you have done a good enough job of crafting a life where some things don't feel as worky, then, you just end up doing more of it, don't you?
Exactly.
That's the sort of joy and curse of travel. If it's fun. So you just, once you're in it, you can't look at it any differently, can you? What a wonderful idea that is with the family. I'm going to try and steal that one as well. And
Well, tell your
try and
kids so
work
they
on that.
start planning to do it now.
Yeah. Start the fund. Kind of last couple of questions. Because I could just keep going. I've still got my list of things that we're not going to get anywhere near. But tell me firstly, what is your plan for the business foundation? Like you've mentioned a few things there. If you look forward over the next 5-10 years, however long you want to look, what ideas are flying around in your head, Portia?
I'm always a bit nervous about plans because then you find yourself listening to the podcast 10 years later and you're like, oh, that's embarrassing. Um,
We won't hold you to
my,
it.
well, no, you should actually, because my goal, my dream, that is really my number one mission is, somehow to, create a kind of hundreds or so hectare reserve on this island, which is for many, many reasons been mostly obviously in part due to the fact that people thought that the islanders were murderous, have not been very developed. But now people realize that the islanders are in fact charming and lovely and it's a great place to run a business, could rapidly develop.
Mm.
And I am really into the idea of creating a kind of a reserve or a sanctuary, reintroducing indigenous or native plant species, thus bringing back insects and bird life, and then eventually reintroducing some of the fauna that you would have found here, which is no longer on this island, and creating a school for people who are perhaps kind of what I would have said in sort of old-fashioned England would have been apprentice age, so kind of 14 years and above, to learn about what I would call non-awkward hospitality and how intrinsically connected it is to environmental stewardship and social equality, and to kind of build out an education program around that, which could then actually kind of provide the teams that go on to run the properties on the island to make sure that eventually tourism on this island is really kind of self-populated. And at the same time expand what the Green Apple Foundation does. We do a lot of work with intelligent waste management that also converts waste into circular economic opportunities. So essentially creating value from waste, which we do very successfully on site. So at Blue Apple, we actually only produce 3 bin bags of waste a day, which is pretty good for
Wow.
a hotel. And actually would like to roll that out to the residential parts of the islands and do that in a kind of series of pilot schemes going street by street. And to keep Blue Apple at the centre of all of that would probably mean building out a few more bedrooms, but not ever turning it into a huge resort. But to really create a model that proves that responsible hospitality and like real society and community and environmental regeneration are the absolute kind of yin and yang to one another. And we do it on a small scale now, but I'd like to do it on a kind of an island-wide scale, and just bring in the other operators on the island, the other hotels, We've already slightly seen it. We see other businesses on this island and some of the other islands around Cartagena competing now to talk about how much they recycle. To talk about, do they have a glass crushing machine? Or to talk about things that they've seen us do. And I want to kind of capitalize on that and turn competitive edge into doing the right thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Rather than, we're the cheapest, or we've got the goldest taps, or
yeah, they've seen the benefit of the messaging getting out about you doing those things. Yeah, yeah.
And so, so I guess the goal is to raise the right kind of money to do that. Because we've done everything, if you like, on a pilot scheme. I mean, we started Blue Apple with $70,000. And then everything we've done since then has been just reinvesting profits and the odd grant to do things with a non-profit, or the odd low interest loan. But we've never actually taken a large amount of capital and seen what we can do with it. And I sort of feel like I'm now 10 years into this. We've proven the model. Now, could somebody come along and give me a serious wad of cash?
Yeah, yeah.
Look what I did with 70 grand. Think what I could do with 15 million.
Yeah. If only you had access to a billionaire or two.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. Listen, to finish, I this is something I ask everyone around what advice they would give to someone who is thinking up starting a tourism business, a tour operator, a hotel. If you were going to give them a piece of advice that they're sat there at home listening to this thinking, oh, should I do it? Or what should I do? Or how should I do it? What would you say to them?
I think there's only one thing that you can say, and that is, and it's such an annoying thing to say, but just do it. Because if you're sitting at home asking yourself questions, you will never convince yourself to do it. The only way to do it is to do it. And prepare yourself for all the hideous mistakes that you'll make, and try and learn as quickly as you can. But if you're doing a SWOT analysis, your weaknesses and threats will, as far as I can work out, always outweigh your strengths and opportunities. So don't focus too much on it. But don't do it if you don't really want to do it. So I suppose ask yourself, do I want to do it? And if you really, really, really want to do it, then do it. And if it doesn't take you where you think it will, like, I don't know, if you wanted to run a marathon at the top of a really high mountain, you might find that where it does take you, if you don't make it all the way up to the top, was what you needed anyway. And it was really enjoyable, and it's what got you off the sofa. You
might collect some cool experiences along the way.
Or meet someone that takes you to the next thing. And by the way, Blue Apple, in this kind of conversation, it sounds very much like Portia pitched up in Colombia and she opened Blue Apple, and there she is 10 years later. I've opened 5 beach clubs, and I'm only involved in 2 of them now. So it's not that it will always go to plan. But you've just got to get on the road.
Yes, love it. Thank you, Portia. It's been really lovely to talk to you. It has lived up to all my expectations. So thank you for taking the time out. And I'm going to go and talk about Sapo Felices and inverted triangles in there. See where we go.
Just go and open your family travel funds.
Hey, this is it.
Tell the kids they're not getting a university fund. They can pay for that themselves.
Yeah, we're all going horse riding in Botswana.
But when they're 25, they can start taking you on really nice holidays.
Super. Thanks, Portia. Lovely to speak to you.
Thanks, Tom. Great questions.
Hey, appreciate it. We'll speak to you soon. All the best.
Bye-bye.
Whoosh. I hope you enjoyed that. Absolutely jam-packed to the rafters with fabulous insight and content. I think that's up there with one of the favourite episodes that I've done here. Portia has so much insight from what she's done, and lots of great stories along the way as well. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you took lots away from that, took lots of notes. I have certainly scribbled a few things down that I'm going to go and try and implement with our business too. If you want to access the resources and other information that were mentioned in that episode, then you can go to north9.agency/podcast. That's north9.agency/podcast. And you'll find that there, and also lots of other episodes that we've done. And if you're a business in travel or hospitality and you're looking for marketing support, then drop us a line and we'd love to find out more about you and see if we can help. You can also read more about our 100% initiative on the website, where we share the story behind how we give all the profit we make from our work with clients to educational charities, with the goal of having a positive impact from the work that we do together. Lots more coming in season 3. Hope you've enjoyed everything so far. let us know on socials and other places where you find us, what you've been enjoying, where you've been getting the most value. If you've got any great guests that you think would like to come on, give us a shout and we'd love to hear from them. And yeah, in the meantime, stay safe, keep exploring, and happy travels.